What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 2 fantasy football running back starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And we kick off Week 2 on Thursday with a big game, the Bills at the Dolphins. Should be pretty entertaining, and there should be a lot of points to be scored here. Now, let's start with the Bills. We're going to start James Cook. He could have had a much bigger outing last week. It was still a respectable performance, but the only thing missing was the touchdowns got vultured by Josh Allen. We knew that would be the case, but it's also not going to be to that extent every single week. So I'm not worried about James Cook. He looked good, and I think he will be in that RB1, RB2 range. The touchdowns come, he's an RB1. Otherwise, still a very strong RB2. Now let's talk about it from the Dolphins side of things, because this is where it's really interesting. So what we already know, this is a crowded backfield. You've got Achane, you've got Raheem Mostert, and you've got Jeff Wilson, and then not to mention the rookie and Jalen Wright. So Raheem Mostert's name, as you can see, doesn't appear here because he's already been ruled out of this game. Quick turnaround. And there's an asterisk next to Achane's name because he's also potentially a game time decision. So this is one you really, really have to monitor. If Achane does play, I will say these were the scenarios that you drafted Achane for when Raheem Mostert isn't there, and high-scoring upside games like this, then you have to start him. Now, I will say what we saw last week when both Mostert and Achane were playing at the same time and healthy. Look, if Achane doesn't get all those boatload of receptions, that rushing output doesn't look that great, and which is why we were saying during draft season probably would shy away from him. But look, that's a conversation for another time. Now, if Achane is unavailable, Jeff Wilson is kind of the lead guy here. I think then you could potentially take a shot with Jalen Wright. Right now, I'm kind of operating under the assumption that Achane does play. If he doesn't, though, Wilson and Wright, I do tend to believe that the Dolphins are going to use a two-man rotation. And I do think that Jalen Wright is, the more high upside explosive guy out of the two. But again, it's kind of a dart throw. It's if you're desperate, if you're really looking for upside and a home run type of play, that you should also realize could end up busting. So with all that said, you just really have to monitor the health of Achane here for the Dolphins. That's what it really hinges on. Afterwards, 49ers at the Vikings. So with the 49ers, look, McCaffrey, a surprise inactive in week 1. Unfortunate because it was a Monday night game, so you kind of got screwed unless you had Jordan Mason. And if you did have Jordan Mason, boy, oh boy, was that a great feeling because he absolutely dominated. And he dominated in a tough matchup versus that Jets defense. So hopefully, if you're a McCaffrey owner, you've got the handcuff. And look, obviously, if he plays, you start him. That's always the case, even if he's not 100%. If McCaffrey plays, then I will be sitting Jordan Mason. Let's get that out of the way. There is a chance, though, from the reports that we saw from Schefter leading up to week 1, that McCaffrey might also sit in week 2. I don't think this is exactly the toughest matchup versus the Vikings. So I could see Jordan Mason being the guy here. And, I mean, based on what we saw, whichever one of these guys plays is an RB1, top 5 running back upside. So hopefully you have at least Jordan Mason if you drafted McCaffrey. Now, for the Vikings, I'm not going to lie to you, very, very tempted to put Aaron Jones as a sit. I don't like him in this matchup. I think this is going to be a much tougher game for the Vikings than versus the Giants in week 1. The 49ers know Sam Darnold. Aaron Jones, had some success in week 1, but again, this 49ers defense, it's on another level. And I think Aaron Jones is going to be in the low-end RB2, RB3 type of category. But volume perspective, pass-catching upside, that's why he kind of goes into the start column. Just don't be surprised if this one isn't as great as week 1 start. And he will be touchdown dependent in order to have a good outing here. And then Ty Chandler, more so just a handcuff. Again, I will be sitting him. Moving on, Seahawks at the Patriots. Another potential injury watch here. For the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker gets banged up late in that game in week 1. he's, similar kind of just wait and see. No real news as of today, so you just have to monitor it. If he plays, he's the guy that I want to start, and if he plays, I'm benching Charbonnet. But if Walker doesn't play, then I think Charbonnet becomes a decent flex appeal. I think probably a mid-level RB2. And then for the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson. Look, he had a huge game in week 1, but I don't think this is what we can expect every single week. If anything, I'd say Ramondre Stevenson is a really, really good sell high candidate, but again, that's a conversation for another time. I do think that some better teams and that, tougher matchups, things like that, negative game scripts will catch up to the Patriots. So keep all those things in mind. And then I'm sitting Antonio Gibson. I just don't think he has really all that much value at this point in time. So as of right now, though, Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, I feel good about both of them as long as Walker plays. Then Giants at the Commanders. Not a lot of names that I love here. So I'm going with Brian Robinson. Looked solid last week, got the bulk of the carries. Eckler didn't really eat into that too much. It was Jaden Daniels, like we expected. He, vultured touchdowns, things like that. But we knew this would be a situation like this. Daniels is a run-first quarterback, so it's going to be one of these things all season long. But I think Brian Robinson still has standalone, upside. He proved that last week. And I think he's a solid, mid to high-end running back too. And I mean, with the matchup itself, the Giants don't scare me. It is a divisional clash, so we'll see what happens. But I like Brian Robinson. I do have Austin Eckler as a sit. I just don't think he's going to get enough volume rushing-wise between Robinson and Daniels. If you're starting Eckler, you're starting him primarily in full PPR leagues where you're desperate for a flex option because you're praying that he gets you around 5 receptions for like 40 yards, something like that, similar to last week. But I think that's, it's tough to ask for that every single week. And if the Commanders pull away here, they're not going to be doing a lot of passing. So for that reason, I have Eckler as a sit. And then for the Giants, this was the worry all offseason long. Saquon Barkley, what he did with Daniel Jones these last couple of years was extraordinary. And it speaks volume to his talent. But Singletary is not in that conversation. And now all those Daniel Jones issues, you can't just turn it around and hand it off to talent like Barkley. All those things are coming back to bite them. Negative game scripts, Daniel Jones taking away opportunities rushing. So because of all those things, I think Singletary here is somebody that you want to avoid and could potentially be the case all season long. Then Chargers at the Panthers. I'm only looking at the Chargers side of things. J.K. Dobbins could potentially be one of the steals of drafts, right? A lot of people were going with Gus Edwards first, but Dobbins looked like the better of the two. Hopefully he stays healthy this year. That's what we say every single year, I feel like. But hopefully this is the year. And this is a great matchup. The Panthers stink. They lost Derek Brown as well on the defensive line. Their best defensive tackle by far. Their best defensive player by far. So this is going to be a long game. The Chargers are going to run it down the throat of the Panthers. And even though Gus Edwards seems like he's going to be the number 2, I'm telling you, folks, he will have opportunities in this game. I could see the Chargers having this game already decided by like the third quarter and then just saying, all right, we don't have to do anything more with Dobbins. Just let Gus Edwards finish the rest of the game. And I could see decent performances from both these guys. I think both can be, RB2s, and Dobbins has the upside to be much better than that. So I love the Chargers running backs here. For the Panthers, completely different situation. Look, I thought that with the Panthers, they couldn't get worse than last year, but damn, they proved me wrong. Bryce Young really struggled. That offensive line, I mean, you looked at improvements in the offseason, didn't really pan out. So how much is the O-line? How much is Bryce Young? Well, you got to answer those questions. There's also a negative game script to be thought of here. So I think this is going to be a situation with the Panthers all season long. I'm sitting Hubbard. I'm sitting Miles Sanders. And yeah, we'll see what happens when Jonathan Brooks comes from his injury, but I could see a similar type of situation then too. Afterwards, Saints at the Cowboys. I'll start Alvin Kamara, and look, he's coming off a really nice game versus the Panthers, but that's going to be the case for every single running back facing the Panthers, really any almost player facing the Panthers. So I'd say temper your expectations if you expect the exact same type of performance from Kamara. Now, the good thing is the Saints, I believe, will have to pass the football here, so the PPR upside for Kamara is retained versus the Cowboys. So I like Kamara as a low-end RB1, and that's going to be the case all season long. I said it during the draft season. Kamara was a steal in drafts. Now, I wouldn't start Jamal Williams. The reason why he was fantasy relevant last week is because he was playing the Panthers. Again, that's not the case this week. For the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, Dowdle, I didn't love what I saw from either of them, right? Like Zeke had a touchdown, but the carries were kind of close-ish. I do think Zeke has the leg up here, but again, I think this is going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup. I think it's going to be close to 50-50. And if neither of these guys gets a touchdown, I think neither of them are really fantasy viable. That's why I'm going to say that they are sits this week. Colts at the Packers. I'm starting Jonathan Taylor. The Packers defense is one that got, gouged by Saquon Barkley last week, and I think Taylor can have success here. So I really like Taylor as an RB1. For the Packers, Josh Jacobs, I do have him as a start, but his upside, just a heads up, folks, if Jordan Love does not play, will not be in that RB1 conversation. Probably won't even be a high-end RB2. Will be in the low to mid-level RB2s. But, considering injuries, considering some matchups, things like that, I think you kind of got to look at Jacobs as a start still. Then Browns at the Jaguars. I'm starting Jerome Ford. Again, another guy that I really liked during the draft process. I said, while Nick Chubb is out, Jerome Ford is going to be a really solid running back. He proved that last week, even in a loss. So I think he can do it again here. I think he is a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. For the Jaguars, Travis Etienne, I would start him. Now, I know maybe some people are worried about Tank Bigsby with his performance, similar carries. The yardage was impressive, but I do believe that this is still Etienne's team. I think the Jaguars really mismanaged the game last week versus the Dolphins. They were up and they just kind of coasted. That's not how you beat the Dolphins. So Bigsby to me still is more so a handcuff to Etienne, if anything, in the case of injuries, but I still prefer Etienne, especially in PPR. I have him as a high-end RB2. Bigsby is a sit. I don't think we're going to see the same type of usage every single week from him. Afterwards, Jets at the Titans. Breece Hall, easy start. I think he is going to have a solid performance versus the Titans. The Jets kind of got flustered a little bit versus the 49ers. I think they're going to bounce back here versus Tennessee. Hall, top 5, top 3 running back. Titans, Tony Pollard. He was a guy that was a nice result in week 1. Pleasant surprise. Now, this is a much tougher matchup versus the Jets than as opposed to the Bears. So I will say again, temper your expectations, but Pollard seems like to be the guy to own compared to Spears. So for that reason, I have him as a start. I'm hoping some of the pass catching upside again translates here in those PPR formats. I think he's more so in that probably, low-end RB2 category. Then Bucks at the Lions. I'll start Rachaad White. I'm not super worried about Bucky Irving. I think this is a similar situation with Etienne and Bigsby, more so a handcuff type of deal. I like the upside in PPR for Rachaad White. I think this can be a high-scoring affair. So White to me is a high-end RB2, could be RB1 if there's touchdown success for the Lions. Again, I'll start both Gibbs and Montgomery. Both these guys had solid performances in week 1. I think they can carry it forward into week 2. As I've said before, when one of these guys is injured, the other becomes a superstar. So in those situations, it's a no-brainer. But here, while they're both active, do vulture each other a little bit. I do tend to believe that Gibbs still has the higher upside, but Monty is a very solid flex. Then Raiders at the Ravens. I'm only interested in Derrick Henry. While Henry, his best years might be behind him, I think that he's still going to get those red zone carries. He's going to have that success, and that's going to be enough to warrant being a starter. And versus good matchups, like versus the Raiders, I like Derrick Henry. I think he's an RB1, especially in standard leagues. I would sit Justice Hill. I think he's more so that pass-catching guy, and unless the Ravens are trailing, which I don't think they will be, he's not going to be a factor. And then for the Raiders, White, Alexander Madison, another backfield that, question mark, maybe Madison actually ends up being the guy. as the season progresses, which would be funny considering people called Zamir White the Alexander Madison of 2024. But look, I don't like this matchup at all, whether it's White, whether it's Madison. I would be sitting the Raiders. Then Rams at the Cardinals. I think what we saw in week 1 from both these teams is that they trust the vets that they have. So Kyron Williams, forget about Blake Corum, James Conner, forget about Burton. Both these guys are starts. You fire them up. Williams has the higher upside, but James Conner still high-end, mid-level running back 2. Williams could be an RB1. Again, just kind of depends how this thing goes. Afterwards, Bengals at the Chiefs. I will give Zach Moss the start here. I was saying in the draft process again that I prefer Moss over Chase Brown. He looked like the better of the two in week 1. Now, again, it was a bad result in week 1, but he looked like he got more of the opportunities. So I'll give a speculative start to Zach Moss here. But again, temper the expectations. I think more so low-end RB2 for the Chiefs. Pacheco, you start him every single week. And I think you've got high-end RB2 type of upside there. And then Chase Brown, you can't start both Moss and Brown. It's got to be one of the two or when one is injured. So for now, I'm sitting Brown. Steelers at the Broncos. I'd only start Najee Harris, and honestly, I feel iffy about that too. The reason I'm willing to start him is because Jaylen Warren isn't 100% right now. Maybe when he is, then it's back to a full committee. You've also got potentially Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. If Fields starts, he takes away the opportunities rushing-wise. So I think if you start Harris, again, you're probably a little bit desperate. Low-end running back too. For the Broncos, I don't like the backfield. I don't like the matchup necessarily. I think it's a split situation with Williams, McLaughlin. So I'm sitting both Javonte and Jaleel. Then Bears at the Texans. To me, you go with Joe Mixon. I think that Joe Mixon is the easy start here. Had a lot of success week 1. The Bears weren't great versus the run in week 1, so Mixon should be a high-end running back 2 with higher upside, especially if the Texans pull away from the Bears. And then I would be sitting DeAndre Swift. Look, if the Bears offensively didn't really do anything last week, they have to be thanking, their lucky stars that they even won that game versus the Titans, because the Titans found every which way to lose. It's because of the defense and the special teams. So DeAndre Swift, I don't love the situation right now. The Bears will have to air it out here more, but in what could be a potentially negative game script, if the Texans pull away early, Swift to me is a sit. And then finally, Falcons at the Eagles. This one's really simple. 2 superstars, Bijan, Saquon Barkley, both had solid performances, especially Barkley week 1, but the upside for Robinson is there. You start both of them. Both are top 5 running backs on the week. But with that, we wrap up our week 2 fantasy football running back starts and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Again, let us hear in the comment section, agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.